again, this is kind of my opinion on it, or everyone else might have different ideas, which would be good to go through later. So the SRF and the RDF, if you're diverting some of that from landfill, it means the tonnage is going to landfill are decreasing at the moment, and the statistics show that they are decreasing. Again, some of that's down to the recession and down to kind of harder economic times, but some of it is down to the fact that they are now taking that municipal solid waste, and at that in-between stage they're diverting some of it off to use as this fuel. So, could be counted as a good thing. Cement kilns and power stations, if they don't need to use fossil fuels, if they don't need to get in their heavy fuel oils because they can use this, then you're conserving resources. It does reduce CO2 emissions because of the carbon neutral fractions in the SRF. And it's argued as well that because you're not importing so much fossil fuel, that you're a bit more self-sufficient in terms of energy consumption. The cons, a lot of people and a lot of forums think that it's kind of a lazy way out. It's an easy way of the waste contractors sending it off as fuel, and the implication is that they don't tend to take out a lot of the recyclables that they could, that by leaving in some of the plastics and not separating out as much, you're getting a higher calorific value to it. And if that's the case, then, will we end up recycling as much? If you think that is going back into the system and not actually being recycled, does it kind of counteract what we've been taught to do over the last few years? So it might decrease your incentive to segregate your waste. There are still some air emissions from SRF. You could get higher metal emissions, dioxin and furans from the chlorides in the material. And again, there is a problem in Ireland at the moment with the quality of the SRF. There is no real regulation at the moment. The EPA tend to be delighted that the recovery rate's very high. You just need to make sure that there's enough regulation that the SRF does meet the standards that it should. So the recycling infrastructure, some of the pros to that. Processing, there is more and more processing happening in Ireland. It leads to jobs, which is always good. And every time you deal with something in Ireland, it means you're reducing transportation costs. You're not shipping waste abroad. In terms of shipping, say, to India or China, a lot of the time the argument is that the boats are going back empty anyway, so you may as well fill them with something. But if you can deal with something in the country, if you're not transporting it, it's always much better. Cons, a lot of the processing still goes abroad. It takes place abroad. A lot of these are valuable resources. You've got mercury, you've got cadmium, you've got a lot of aluminium, copper. Stuff that is you should be keeping that. You can sell that on for huge amounts of money. Plastics are getting upwards of €200 a ton now for plastic waste. If you can keep that and process it in the country, again, it's feeding back into the economy. And then you could have more jobs if we had a robust waste infrastructure system. Briefly, I'll just dabble in the legislation side of things. I don't want to put you to sleep too early. What shapes our waste management systems at a European level? A new waste framework directive came into force December the 10th, 2010. That's when it was transposed into Irish law as such. It's the first time that waste management legislation has put the waste hierarchy in as law. You must prevent, minimise, your waste triangle. So we basically have to do that, whereas before it was more kind of you should do this, it'd be great. Now it's actually law. There's going to be a change in some of the waste management practices coming down the line. Again, it'll take kind of a few years before they filter down. There's new targets for recovery. paper, metals, plastic and glass specifically. And there's a much more emphasis on life cycle assessment. And again, this is a bit of a change from what would have happened before, where we started the process at the end, where what do you do when you produce the waste? You recycle it, you recover it, you do X, Y and Z to it. But now they're saying, well, let's look at the whole life cycle analysis of it. You know, you're looking at the energy, as Michael was saying, for every bin that goes out, there's 70 bins of waste produced, you know, en route to getting your own bin. So that will definitely change, I suppose, waste management practices in Ireland as well. The landfill directive has been around since 1999, but different parts of it only came into force kind of through the last 10 years or so. There are certain limits on waste to landfill through that landfill directive. Biodegradable waste is probably the main one, but things like gypsum waste, you know, your plasterboard and stuff, a lot of those now can't go into landfill anymore because of this directive, which is all good. At a national level, the Waste Management Act 1996 and all the kind of acts and regulations that follow that, they're the main structure for our waste management, and that's what all, you know, our regulations in terms of waste collection permits for contractors, facility permits, licenses for landfills, that kind of thing. That's where that all came from. There's a national waste prevention programme that was set up by the EPA, and they bring out a plan out for every few years in terms of how they're going to prevent waste. So there's a lot of initiatives that kind of are born from that. There's a national strategy on biodegradable waste, and STRIVE is a EPA research programme. This is what's been put in place to try and get the whole life cycle analysis thing going. So they're due to report on that soon enough, actually early 2011, with some kind of guidelines and some proposals as to how we do that. And then you have a national hazardous waste management plan. Again, they go in kind of cycles, so 2008, 2012. So again, how are we going to prevent hazardous waste getting out into the environment? How is it going to be dealt with properly? So I suppose it's the case of, you know, we're already recycling our waste. You know, what do we need to do anymore? Why should we bother keeping it up? You know, like, I suppose on the legal side of things, to meet EU and national targets, there's certainly EU targets that we have to meet. We're currently at risk of not meeting some of our targets. We have to divert 50% of household waste from landfill by 2013. As of the end of 2009, it's only at 29%, so that's marked down an at-risk category. And by 2013, we have to have 50% of 1995 figures diverted from landfill and 65% by 2015. So they're basically saying that, you know, most of your biodegradable waste should be diverted from landfill by 2015. Also, to conserve resources. If you don't create the waste in the first place, obviously you're going to conserve resources across the board, and it does save you money. I mean, you know, it is cheaper to, you know, to take out what you can from your bin, recycle it, home compost, that kind of stuff. And the environmental reasons, say for hazardous waste, if you divert your hazardous waste from landfill, there are a whole host of environmental problems that can lead from people putting hazardous waste in their bins. Everything from, you know, pouring your cooking oil down the drain can pollute water, can deoxygenate water and affect your aquatic life. Mercury in a fluorescent tube. I don't know how many sites I've been on where I've seen broken fluorescent tubes where they've just been left and the rain comes along and washes them into the drain. So 30,000 litres of water can be polluted from just one fluorescent tube, from the powder that's in that. Diversion of waste from landfill prevents your landfill gases, your leachates, odour issues, anything that, if you can divert from landfill, you know, it's a good thing. And then the energy that's spent on recycling and recovering. So once you get past the prevention stage, you still have to take account of, you know, the resources that are used to recycle, there's a lot of energy that goes into recycling aluminium. It's worth it because the metal is worth so much, but if you could not actually produce that in the first place, then you're not using that energy. And then just in terms of hazardous waste, it's illegal to put them in your bin. You are not allowed to do it. People still throw batteries from their phones or whatever into the bin, and now ignorance is not a defence of prosecution. The chances of someone bringing you to court over throwing one of your batteries in the bin is fairly slim, but again, it's something that I suppose everyone should be aware of. There are a few challenges to domestic waste prevention. Even though everyone's becoming a bit more thrifty in the last couple of years, we're still focused as a consumer society on convenience, very conscious of fashion and trends, obsolescence, anything that's, for men it's probably gadgets, for women it's probably clothes, but anything next year, it's, if it's out of fashion, it's gone. So there's still quite a high turnover of goods. There's a couple of times I've tried to bring something, a laptop or a radio or a camera in to get repaired, only for the guy or the girl to say, no, it'll cost you more to repair it than it will to actually buy a new one. And that's the way manufacturing's gone. They don't want you to bring it in and get it repaired. They want you to buy new ones. And that was fine during the boom times because everyone could afford to get a new one and everyone wanted to get a new one. But now you find a lot more people are getting stuff repaired. So that trend has changed a bit. But it's still very hard to go in and get something minor, well, what you think is relatively minor, repaired. And then tradition. I mean, if I take out my sewing box, some of my friends will look at me like, you've got a sewing box, as in if I'm repairing some of my clothes, and quite enjoy it because I'm a bit of a nerd. But it's still not the culture to sew up a hole in one item of clothes. So that kind of tradition is gone. A lot of people wouldn't even know how to do that if they wanted to. And then I suppose there's just excess consumption. People have a poor, especially I suppose the younger generation, which I'm not really part of anymore, but the kids will not even understand, excess has been part of their lives, because they were brought up in the good times. So I suppose that's a problem as well. A few tips there, and again I won't go into this, a lot of it's stuff that you already know anyway. Packaging, you say, no thanks, I don't need the apples that are already in the bag, I'll just put them straight into my basket. Concentrated products rather than big bulky ones. Your shopping bags, get off mailing lists for junk mail. Textiles and clothing, there's loads of outlets for textiles and clothing, and you still find people putting it in the bin, which I find amazing. And home composting for your green waste. Even if you don't want to put cooked meat or anything like that, you don't have to go down that route if you want. You can just do your raw scraps of veg and fruit in and get a really nice compost if you have the garden for it. So that's pretty much it. I suppose we'll leave it open to questions now or at the end. But so thank you for listening.
Thank you.